So we're on page 14, guys, and it says statistical terminology. Do you understand why we have to do this? Look at that word, terminology. So this is the science of words. If we don't understand a particular word, it can mean the whole difference between how we're going to acquire that particular knowledge. Temba, can I ask you just to read, please?
Before examining the broad areas of statistics, it is necessary to become familiar with certain terms and concepts used extensively in the subject. The statistical terminology you will encounter in this theme includes random variables, sampling means, populations or universes, and samples.
Okay. Look at those words again, guys. So Brandon was telling me he needs to gather statistical information. So he could, if he's battling to gather it, because he's talking to me about time frames. You don't mind me sharing this, Brandon? Yeah, he's talking to me about time frames. Time frames are often stressful, correct? We have to get it in, and we have to get it in by yesterday. So what would he look at? He might actually look at samples. So maybe there were sample studies done last year that he could maybe bring into his observations. Look at that populations or universes. Look at that sampling units. Which sampling units have we used? Have we used black people between the ages of 18 to 25? Have we used black males? Have we used white males? Have we used just South African males? Do you see the difference just between using the word black or South African? It incorporates everyone. Is it black Zulu mother tongue Africans? Is it females? Is it pregnant females? All of these issues. So it all boils down to the words that we use, those terminologies. And then look at that word random variables. What does the word random mean?
Random, isn't it like there isn't really a pattern?
Different, no pattern. Unpredicted. You haven't got time to prepare an answer. And that's how the CPR gathers their information. It's random variables. Do you know how the CPR gathers their information? Remember I told you it's a basket load of goods between 400 and 600 items. And what they do is they go to approximately 3,000 stores across South Africa. 3,000 stores. You don't know the names, and it's done on a random basis. So they don't let Brandon know that they're coming into his shop. So they go in and they see, right, toilet paper, this toilet paper in his shop is 3 Rand. In Pierre's shop it's 2 Rand, 1 Rand, 6 Rand, and they add all of these up and they divide by 400 and they get a price, an average price for those 300 stores. You with me? So that would be a random variable. Brandon doesn't know I'm coming in. Okay? And by law he has to give me that particular information. Okay, everybody okay with that? So you don't want people to prepare a particular answer. You want it to be as truthful as possible. Okay. Random variables. Any characteristics being measured or observed is called a variable. Since a variable can take on different random values at each measurement or observation, it is termed a random variable. Examples of this is the distance traveled per day by taxis. Each daily distance is a single observation or value of the random variable. The daily occupancy rate of a guest house in Tshwane. Each daily occupancy count is a single observation of the random variable. Okay, and that random variable is that particular holiday or guest house in Tshwane. You got me? Everyone okay with that? Right, sampling unit. What does a sampling unit mean? Can I ask Joe? Yeah. Will you read for me, please?
A sampling unit is the item or individual being measured or counted with respect to the random variables under study. Example, the appropriate sampling units for the above 2 random variables are taxis and guest houses in Tshwane.
You see that, guys? So those are random variables, okay? Carry on.
More than one random variable can be defined for a given sampling unit. For example, an employee sampling unit can be measured in terms of age, random variable 1, qualifications, random variable 2, and years of experience, random variable 3.
Okay, good. Look at the next one there, guys. It says population or universe. Now remember I said the South African situation is very unique, correct? Very specific. And why is it very specific, very unique? Because you've got 11 official languages. And that's why often when you deal with stats, you will hear the term maybe black or white or Indian or colored, just because you've got all of these cultures. So which particular cultural group are we actually talking about? It doesn't mean that the stats are being racial or racist. It just means that we want to look at that particular population group to determine a particular outcome. Okay, does that make sense? And then again, you might also find stats in South Africa that look at the whole of the South African situation. So then they'll look at South African youths between the ages of 16 and 18. Then we know we're looking at all of those 11 official language groups. Yeah?
So do you mean that for every research maybe in South Africa should be taken into account in 11 languages? Or?
Yes. If you want it to be, it depends what kind of information you want to get out of it. For example, Brandon isn't going to have to, if he draws up a questionnaire for his particular department, an assumption, we can make a calculated assumption because we chat to everyone in English, correct? So we can make a calculated assumption in this particular group here that if we put a questionnaire out, we don't have to put it in Tshwane and Xhosa and Zulu, etc. Everybody speaks English, so we can just set one particular questionnaire. But if you're sending a question out to people that you don't know, and it's maybe in a rural area, and you know that rural area is in Limpopo, what's the language there? Pedi, but I cannot make an assumption that everybody there speaks Pedi. You see the problem with that? That's what I'm saying to you. Okay, so it's very situational, your particular question, but it depends on the group that you're actually addressing that research to or that questionnaire to. Like remember your PMA calls for a questionnaire to your workplace, so your questionnaire could be in English, correct? Because you can make a calculated assumption because you converse with those people in English all the time that you just need one questionnaire. But somebody who's on a mine, who maybe knows that there are Zulu people and Xhosa people and Venda people, then you might need 3 different... Yes, of course.
In terms of questioning people, I would like to question in 11 languages. But in terms of giving my observation, am I obliged to give my observation in 11 different languages?
I love the question. Okay, he's not obliged to do that. But the correlation of that information is quite problematic. Because if you've got 11 official languages, in theory, you're going to have 11 translators. And then if your report is drawn up in English, because maybe it's for an English organization, so you're going to draw the report up in English. You with me? So you don't have to draw the report up into 11 official languages. Have I answered your question? So the questionnaire, yes, that would have to be in 11 official languages if that is the information that you want from that particular community, and there's 11 different racial groups there. But your report, if you're drawing it up in English, that's fine. But the problem, not really problem, the challenge comes where you need to have translators for every single one of those questionnaires. See what I'm saying? So you need a vendor translator, etc. And they need to be quite au fait with the English language as well, because the report's going to be written in English. Think about, I know your home language is French, correct? So think about French words. Certain words in English and in French. If I translate directly from French into English, haven't you made some mistakes before? Okay? Think about it's that kind of thing. So you would need a translator, otherwise it's not going to make sense. Who's ever bought something at a Builders before, or Builders or whatever, and you open it up and you say, okay, they've got quite a extensive manual here to put this particular item together, and you open up and it's been translated from Chinese into English. Yeah, if you open it up and you think, oh, I don't know what's going on, and after the first page you're ready to throw the thing through the window. Why? Because it's been translated directly from the Chinese language into the English language, and it hasn't been done well. Okay, so that's what happens with stats. You need to have a translator that is au fait in both languages, especially the English language and that particular language that you're translating into. Okay, but good questions. But your report invariably, especially in the South African situation, will be in English. Okay. Right, random variables, we spoke about. Sampling unit, very important, we spoke about that. And then populational universe, this is important. Which group are we talking about? Brandon, why don't you read for me, please?
Population is the collection of all the observations of a random variable under study and about which one is trying to draw conclusions in practice. Population must be defined in very specific terms to include only those sampling units with characteristics that are relevant to the problem. Examples: for the above 2 random variables, each population can be defined as all taxis in SA and all guest houses in Tshwane.
Okay, so you see that you're grouping those together. So it's not in this particular case, we're not talking about population density groups. We're talking about the populations associated with those particular random variables, which in the first one was all taxis in SA, and the second one was all guest houses in Tshwane. You with me? Okay, so further examples: finance, all financial transactions, all deposits, withdrawals and transfers in Nedbank, all sales transactions of Mr. Price. Why am I giving you those examples? I hope you can see that it's related back to your PMA. Because in your second PMA, the second requirement of your PMA, you have to draw up a questionnaire, correct? So your questions could be around something simple like that. Maybe you want to draw up a questionnaire around I don't know, financial transactions that take place in your particular department. Maybe there's 10 of you or 20 of you, and the youngest person is 18 and the oldest person is 40. And you want to see what financial transactions do those people engage in on a weekly basis or on a daily basis. So 18, how many transactions do you engage in? The person says 3, so you put 3 down. 20, they do 4. And up to 40, he only does 1 or she only does 1. And you're going to collate all of those observations. Okay, does that make sense, guys? Marketing, look at that. All Kalula passengers, all life policy holders of African Life. Personnel, all Woolworths employees, all chartered accountants registered with SAICA, all members of SAMWU. So all of that, okay, is statistical data. Sample, not every member of the population is observable or measurable for reasons mainly of cost, time, and possibly unit destruction. So what are they talking about there? They're talking about a sample unit. Come back to the CPR. Is it possible for Stats South Africa to go to every single person? How many people approximately in South Africa? 50 million, 55 million. Okay, there was a party the other night, so I think it's about 57 million. No, I'm just joking. It's about 50, they say between, when I say they, Stats South Africa, approximately 55 million. But let's call it 50 million. So 50 million, is it possible for Stats South Africa to knock on every single door and say, what is in your basket? What is in your basket? No. So they have to take a sample unit. What is their sample unit? Between 400 and 600 items in a basket. They call it a trolley load of goods or a basket load of goods. Have you heard of this before? Okay, so, and that's where the problems come in, because Sashia might say, you know what, I don't eat that particular product of meat. I don't eat pap. I don't eat rice. I don't use that toilet paper. I don't, whatever. So the big problem from a CPR point of view is people say, how relevant is it? But as a result of those three things, look at it, cost, time, and possibly unit destruction, we have to have a sample unit. It's impossible to go to every single person, every single year, eh? Because remember, the CPI is drawn up, maybe not every year, maybe it's drawn up every, maybe quarterly. So once every 4 months, once every 3 months. Okay, so imagine you've got people going around South Africa day in and day out asking you, what's in your trolley load of goods this month? Is it feasible? It's just not viable. Okay, and that's why we need sample units. Okay. Right, examples, well, you can look at those, but basically they're saying there's a random sample of 200 taxis. So we can't look at every single taxi in South Africa, so we're going to take a random sample of 200. And guaranteed there's going to be a person like Emmanuel, from a random point of view, people might come to you and say, why did you choose those 200 taxis? You should have chosen those 200 taxis. Why did you take a taxi from there and a taxi from there? So there's always going to be speculation about how that data was acquired. Okay, but unfortunately we need to have random variables there. Right, guys, further examples. Look at the random variable, the population, the sampling unit, and sample. Just look at it quickly and tell me if there's anything that doesn't make sense to you. I'm going to look at the last one while you're looking through it. Look at the TV program. Yes? Yes.
So all the stats reports are not 100% accurate.
All the stat reports are not 100% accurate. What is your definition of 100% accurate?
Okay, let's say if I want to write a report about 50 million of South African population, and I'm not able to do that. I had an opportunity to have a sample units certain amount of people.
Yes.
So which means even if those sampling units give me their reports or their
honest reports, yes.
honest
Okay.
reports.
So they're 100% accurate.
That doesn't really represent the whole setup.
100%. Okay. So I didn't want to answer Pierre's question for him, but indirectly he's answered it for himself. Did you hear the question? So does that mean that all stats are not 100% accurate? What is the answer to that? Yes. Because it's often these stats don't look at every single person involved in that particular statistical analysis. There's always a chance. Remember that quote? I'll go back to it just to read it again there for you. How to lie with statistics. Also, lies, damn lies, and statistics. I don't know if Sashia is being honest in that questionnaire. I can't force her to be honest, depending on the nature of the questions. I don't know if she's being honest or if Shalia is being honest. I don't know. So I have to take that information as being true and correct from the actual person that's asked to partake in that particular research task. But to come back to 100% correct, it's very, very difficult to say that something is 100% accurate. What was on the news yesterday? I'll give you a hint. Domestos and Dettol. Why was Domestos and Dettol in the news yesterday?
Because the product is dangerous at the moment and it's not actually made by South African Unilever.
Okay, it comes back to what Pierre's saying about 100%. A Consumer Protection Act, they say that it kills 99.9% of germs. And what they did is they went and they tested. So you might argue the point, hang on a second, but that's true. Because when we did our research, it killed 99.9% of the germs. But the man spoke about a word, listen to the word, efficacy. When I say the man, the representative from the organization is called the NCSR, the National Credit Service Regulator or something, okay? He came up, I've actually got a YouTube a clip if you guys want to watch it, and he just spoke about the efficacy, so the effectiveness of Dettol. So to come back to you 100% correct, they did research and they showed that that particular Dettol product killed 99.9% of germs. Now all of a sudden this board has come out and said it doesn't even kill 50% of the germs. So my point is, how many germs do you get? You see, point taken. So Pierre's question was, does that mean all statistical data is not 100% correct? And in my opinion, yes. Because it's impossible to say that something is 100% accurate. There's always a chance that there's a variable that is incorrect in that particular equation. Do you think I'm talking nonsense? Okay. So remember, think about this, okay? And I always laugh with that claim where these guys say it kills 99.9% of germs. Do you know what that tenth, because it's a tenth of a percent, do you know what the tenth of a percent of germs equates to? Millions and millions and millions of germs, because there are so many germs. But we think, 99.9%, it's close to 100, eh? Yes, we must be doing quite well. How was it done? It's impossible to make a claim like that. Okay, point taken? Okay, right. I just want you to look at the last one, TV program preference. Look at the population, all TV viewers in PWV area, a sampling unit, a TV viewer in the PWV area. You see that, guys? So the population is all the TV viewers in that area. Now our sampling unit is just one. And we're going to say whatever that person likes or doesn't like equates to everybody in that particular environment. Maybe from a time point of view, we need some information to work with. But how valuable is that information? And this is where, because remember, from statistical information, what do we need it for? To make business decisions, correct? We draw up business decisions, but what happens if we draw up business decisions? Because invariably we're going to start with a business plan or a business case. So we draw up a business case, we say, there's an opportunity here, we can make money. You draw up the business case because your sample unit was one viewer. You spend all of this money because you sold on this particular idea and it fails. Does it happen? Happens all the time. And that's another proof that it's very, you have to be careful that you don't see statistical information as being 100% correct. It's impossible to say that. Okay. Agreed, Pierre? Emmanuel, you're right? You're right, okay. Right, and then look at the sampling unit. I said one person, and the sample 2,000 randomly selected TV viewers from the PWV area. So the sampling is just a TV viewer in the PWV area, but the sample is 2,000 randomly. What does randomly mean? Maybe across the board. Remember that Gini coefficient? So poor people and wealthy people and middle class people. So you don't want to only take people, a sample unit from the poor area or from a wealthy area. You want to get a holistic view of that particular situation. Descriptive and inferential statistics. The discipline of statistics is made up of two major components. These components are descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So descriptive, what does that word tell you? Describing. Inferential, to infer, to tell about. Okay. So descriptive statistics condenses large volumes of data into a few summary measures. When large volumes of data have been gathered from a variety of sources, there is a need to organize, look at those words, organize, summarize, and extract the essential information contained within this data. For communication to management, this is the role of descriptive statistics. So it describes what the research was about. Emmanuel, what is inferential statistics? Why don't you just read there for me, please?
Inferential statistics generalizes sample finding to the broader population. The data analyzed using descriptive statistical method is usually only a sample of all possible data values in the defined population. Right,
very important, okay. So remember, it's often just a sample. So to come back to Pierre's question, is it 100% accurate? Can't say that because it's a sample. Often we're working on a sample.
I have a question.
Please.
Regarding the jam, because those guys that said the detour or whatever they call it, it kills 99% jam. So these other guys that said no, it's not true. So how are they going to prove it? Because if these other guys, they should prove it that it kills 99% of the jams.
You see, Emmanuel, what happens there? Once again, remember we spoke about the importance of semantics. So remember the Consumer Protection Act, all of this. Remember integration? So we have to think about all of these things. Why was the Consumer Protection Act brought about? It was brought about because often advertising bamboozles the consumer, correct? So when you say germs, there are so many germs out there. So you might find their sample unit of germs was 1 to 100 germs. 1 to 100 germs, guys, that's nothing in the germ world. I don't know how it was done, but you have to ask yourself that question. So out of their sample unit, it killed 99.9% of germs. But then this particular body came to the fore and said, no, you're talking about this germ and that germ. Our sample of germs are these germs. When we did the test showed that it only killed 50% of the germs. And what is the big problem with killing germs? If you don't kill a germ and you put something down, that germ gets stronger. Okay, it builds up a resistance to that, and then that can make you very, very sick. So that's the problem with not killing that particular germ. So to answer your question, how can they prove it? All they do is they draw up a sample unit, or they ask for that information. They say, what was your sample unit? You know what I'm thinking about when Emmanuel is talking? I'm thinking about Lance Armstrong. Just think about Lance Armstrong. What happened with Lance Armstrong? Do you all know who Lance Armstrong is? Lance Armstrong, the cyclist. Remember, he won 7 Tour de France's, okay, and he's been stripped of those titles. How long did it take him to be stripped of those titles? 7 years. Well, actually, no, I'm lying. It took longer, but about 10 years. Why? Because at the time, the knowledge that he won the Tour de France was seen to be true and correct. You with me? But then when it was tested at a later stage, because they had urine samples, so to come back to your germ situation, it was tested again, and they said, hang on a second, if we test this again, it actually shows that he was doping. Okay, therefore, as a result of him doping, that's cheating. We're gonna take those away from you. So to come back to your how can they prove it? Remember, sometimes what they're saying is 10 years ago we killed 99.9% of the germs, but what germs are around now? So remember the time that time constraint. So you maybe you're using old information to try and sell a particular product today, and it's not viable. Okay.
Yeah. So now, does the consumer, do they have the right to sue them?
Of course, yes. Okay. But when you use the word sue, they've got the right to object to to sue, remember it's one consumer or two consumers against an organization. I read something very interesting and scary around cell phones, and who's got online banking? Who deals with online banking? Scary, scary stuff, guys. That as a consumer, we are liable for that money that goes missing out of our account. I was actually blown away. I didn't know that from a consumer protection. Who's had money taken out of their account? I have. I've had money, and it was always given back to me. But this particular lady, it was a SIM card swap scam, and she lost 360,000 rand. And now if you go to the bank, you're talking about can the consumer sue that organization? When she tried to sue them, it was one person. Even if she's wealthy, she's dealing with a multi-million rand organization. They've got lawyers, and they can just prolong the inevitable. But that's what the Consumer Protection Act is there for. So, Emmanuel, I hear what you're saying. How do they prove that it doesn't or does kill 99.9%? They had a sample, like they've got here. These are the germs we're gonna perform the test on, and then they do it in a laboratory. And they say, right, we wipe the counter, all of the germs are on there. So they ask Sashalia to lick the one side of the counter, and no, I'm just joking. Okay, and then they see if that particular product kills those germs. They do a test on it, and they say, only 50% of the germs was killed. Okay. All right, guys, good questions. You guys starting to see where we're going with all of this information. Zama, can I ask you just to read inferential statistics? I'm not going to carry on that, but types of data. Zama, why don't you read for me, please?
There are two reasons for understanding the nature of data. It enables a user to assess data quality and to select the appropriate statistical method to use for analyzing the data.
So this is very important. I'd like you to highlight that. Okay, so remember that's types of data. So understanding the nature of data is important because it enables a user to assess data quality, which is what you're talking about. So Emmanuel said, how do we know that this statement is true or not true? So we can assess data quality, and then the second one, to select the appropriate statistical method to use for analyzing the data. So which statistical method are we going to use? And in stats, guys, have you looked in the library for statistical books or books on stats? How many books on stats do you get? Thousands and thousands and thousands, because you get algorithms. So that there is a very important point. So with the information that we've got, which algorithm are we going to apply? Which statistical method are we going to apply to that information to get valuable information out of it? Okay, right. Taking into account the reasons for understanding the nature of data, we will now consider data quality, data types, qualitative and quantitative random variables. So what are we talking about? Qualitative, quality, variables, and quantitative, large amount of variables. So which one is better, or are they both beneficial? Okay, data quality, very important. So if I come up here and I say, I did a survey yesterday, and listen to my words, I did a survey yesterday, and I proved that 99% of the South African population say that all black men are murderers. Who have I offended? Come on, haven't I offended you? Okay, I've offended you, correct? But I proved yesterday. Look at that. How can you prove in one day, and how can you make a statement like that? And listen to the words that I said. All South Africans can't make a statement like that. We've already said approximately 50 million people in South Africa. If you say that maybe half, let's say half of them are men, that's 25 million. Did I go in one day to every single person in South Africa, black, white, pink, green, all people in South Africa, and ask them that particular question? So this data quality is very, very important. What is the quality of the data that we're actually analyzing? So Zama, why don't you read for me, please?
Data is the raw material of statistical analysis. In any production process, quality control of the raw material is essential to ensure quality finished product. Statistics is no different. In statistics, it is necessary to understand the factors which influence the quality of data needed in statistical analysis. Data quality is influenced by three factors: type of data, data source, method of data collection.
Okay, just look at that again, guys. Type of data, data source, and methods of data collection. Think about the census. Someone spoke about 100% accurate. Do you mean that stats aren't 100% accurate? That's why I said to you, how many people in South Africa? Do we know that that's 100% correct, that it's 5 million on the dot, or 5,191,363? We don't know, because from a census point of view, how were we getting that information? Look at that, methods of data collection. How do they collect data from a census point of view? How do they collect data? They send people around house to house, and also Stats South Africa helps, other databases help as well, but invariably their data collection method, one of the data collections methods is to send people around house to house. Now I'm not saying, but are all people the same? If I ask everyone over here to go collect data, go house to house, I know that Simpiwe, because I spoke to him earlier on, I know he's not going to knock on everyone's door. He's going to go and lay behind a bush and catch a couple of Z's, correct? And maybe fill in the form himself. I don't know if he's done that or not, correct? So you don't know. How many people were collecting information for the census across the whole of South Africa? Let's say it was 30,000 people. Viable? Is that a viable scenario? 30,000 people? Are you telling me that all 30,000 people went from door to door collecting information? No. So how valuable is that information? I'm not saying it's not valuable, but when we put too much emphasis on that information, it becomes a bit of a problem. So we can use it, and we need to use it, but it becomes a little bit of a problem when we say there are only 50 million people in South Africa. There might be 60 million. There might be 45 million. Is that not going to affect the outcome? I don't know. Just remember this. Okay, so methods of data collection, very important. Data source. How did we source that data? That person knocking on the doors. They knocked on the doors, they got the information. Then how did they source that data? Did they maybe lose 3 of the questionnaires? I don't know, maybe the person was walking back home and they lost the questionnaires. So they just kind of made up 3 questionnaires by themselves. I don't know, I'm just asking the question. So that data source, very important. And then types of data. You know the whole adage, the right person for the right job, correct? If that type of data is not understood by the person collecting the data, is there a chance that it's going to be skewed? Yes. So all of these things we have to think about. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Yes. Temba. I like it.
Because imagine using data source only. I mean, this year data source appears. How will it be? Imagine going around during December time, getting everybody in taverns, and based on that, concluding that 90% of South Africans are drinking even during
working hours.
Exactly, or weekdays. So I think timing in that, where are you sourcing that data? And the timing in terms of, how can I put that, the relevance. For me, I think it counts.
No, 100%. I agree with Tim, but do you agree? Okay, so this is how I want you to think now and say, hang on a second, what about this? What about that? But data source would include a time frame, from a time frame point of view. But definitely time is very, very relevant there, especially if you're talking about cyclical trends. What is cyclical? Cyclical meaning over December. Obviously, you're going to find more people in a tavern during the day over December because maybe the work is closed. So you can't draw statistics from that particular month and say 70% of South Africans spend most of their day in a tavern because you've done most of your research over December. Temba, point taken. Well done. Okay, so time, very, very important to justify how viable is that data. A useful acronym in statistics is GIGO, meaning garbage in, garbage out. Isn't that lovely? Garbage in, garbage out. This means that if the data quality is poor, irrespective of the sophistication of the statistical methods used, confidence in the resulting findings will be low. Bianca?
Just another thing, in the latest report for the census, you actually go read the report that they released on Stats SA. They actually state there that it's the assumption that there is 55.7 million people currently in South Africa. and that the population had grown by 1.2 million people in the past year. But they say, they specifically say in the report that they assume, and it is estimated at this. So the validity of the data is also what they report on and what we are told to believe. They state specifically they're not ashamed to even say that we assume and we estimate.
Of course, yes. And it comes back to Pierre's point. Thank you so much for that, Bianca. It's impossible to say that it's 100% accurate. Impossible to say. Sorry, Bianca, I interrupted you. Finished? Okay. But Stats South Africa, this is why, who listens to 702? I said, listen to 702. They might have, I forget the gent's name, but he might have that particular spokesperson on again. And he was really going at this person from statistics, and he was saying, how relevant is that information? That basket of goods doesn't represent me at all as a South African. It might represent Emmanuel, it might represent Joe, but it doesn't represent me. So you cannot tell me that my consumer price index is 5.5%. My consumer price index might be 10%. If I work out my basket of goods. And they say that on Stat, I didn't go on, but they say on Stats South Africa you can actually work out your consumer price index, you personally. So you can go on and you can say, okay, I buy this product, this product, this product, this product. What is my CPI unit? You know, that whole nonsense situation, why are they making, I'm not saying why they're making, but I'm speculative as to why the CPI unit is so low. Emmanuel, why do you think an economist would want the CPI unit to be low? Is it good for economy or bad for economy?
I think they say it's good for the economy.
If the CPI is low, now remember, economists expected it to be at 5.8%. It came out at 5.5%. From an economic growth point of view, what helps an economy to grow? One word. You've got R1 million. What is going to make you want to invest in an economy? One word.
Growth.
Okay, growth, yes. Development, another word.
Profit.
Simple. Sustainability. Come on, I've got R1 million. I want to put my R1 million down. How easy is it going to be for you to... Sorry? Return... all of that can be unjustified. It might not even be true, that return on investment. One word. Say it again? No. What about confidence? What about confidence? That one word, confidence. We speak about investors in an economy. Investors invest for return, this, that, but it all boils down to confidence. Confidence in that particular economy. So if you think about it speculative now, why was the CPI so low? Was it maybe to instill confidence in the economy? I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying think about it. Okay. Other people will come in and say, Richard, you're talking absolute nonsense. I'm just saying think about it. Okay. What are they talking about now? They're talking about maybe bringing the interest rate down next year as a result of the CPI being so good. Sorry, Bianca, I interrupted you.
The actual statistics in South Africa, they can't really reveal the true information to the country, but it will actually break the economy. If you consider things like HIV, what's happening from a growth perspective, the housing, all the negative factors in South Africa, they can't reveal the actual statistics out there. Try to protect the country as well.
Okay, that's conspiracy theories, correct? Remember, these are opinions. It's difficult for us to prove this, but that's an opinion taken, point taken. But be careful of conspiracy theories. Okay, we can start this as well. Me as well. I'm starting a conspiracy theory because I want you guys to think about it. Why is the CPI so good when economists were expecting it to be worse? Okay, I'm just saying this is where conspiracy theories come in, and they say, how was this data collected? Temba?
I think that to a certain extent she is correct. We don't have to always go out there applying our statistics on that point. For instance, we know that in terms of crime, there are interventions made before the release of that report. All of us know that. And we know that because of some political experience that such engagement. So I think it is correct. Look,
your auditor general, for instance, we know that there are departments which could just pump millions of dollars to certain projects that totally unjustified and even not budgeted for. Yes, you'll find imaging out of auditing process, you'll find an unqualified report of that particular department. To me, it really doesn't make sense at all, and it's honest. We don't need, at some point, we don't need an application of statistical method to prove the fact that some of the things are not so hidden for political experience.
Okay. I'm not going to answer any. These are all your viewpoints, but you see what stats does. Stats can start saying, Bianca's saying, hang on a second, how much is being told and how much is being hidden? Temba's saying, be careful. I just want to warn you again. Not that but be careful. We know. We all know. Be careful of a statement like that, guys. Don't make assumptions. We know. We all know. Remember, if you're writing in your PMA, you need to justify these particular arguments, okay? So we know, or if South Africa, you could say this particular source shows that if the HIV statistics are truly known, it would affect the economy negatively because it would impact on confidence levels, But be careful of we know or I know or he says or she says, okay? But points taken, but you need to structure your arguments better, okay? Well done, good, but I'm starting all of these conspiracy theories now. Emmanuel?
Yeah, for example, if a company said to you that, look, invest so amount of money, at the end of this period, you're going to get so amount of money back, and you don't get it back that period as promised. So what are you going to do to them? Because it happens to me, I don't know what to do.
Okay, so what is your point? I want to hear, what is your point?
Can you take them to court for them to pay that money back?
For them to pay that money back?
Yeah,
well, it depends on what kind of contract you signed into. So remember the consumer, if you're talking about a product that was offered to you, let's say it's a cell phone or a car or whatever, and it was promised to you, and the semantics, the wording around that particular product, they lied to you. So for example, I sell this laptop with that phone, and I say a new laptop and a new phone for 3,999 Rand. What is that called? Bundling. It's called bundling. And often large organizations will get rid of old stock, correct? By bundling items together, and they'll say, you're buying this new camera and this laptop for so much. No, it's a new old camera. Listen to the words, it's a new old camera. So in actual fact, they're getting rid of stock, correct? Now from a Consumer Protection Act point of view, you can go to them and say, hang on a second, I was bamboozled. This particular phone, I actually don't even know where to put the on button because it's so old. Okay, or whatever the case may be. So to come back to your point, it's very situational. Can you sue a particular company? It depends on the legalities that you actually signed into.
Yeah, it's something that is published. So I don't know.
Something that's published.
Yeah,
is this a personal problem?
One general.
General. So something that was published. I'm just trying to see the relevance back to stats.
I don't know. According to the company policy and law.
Company policy and law. Okay, come speak to me afterwards because I'm just battling to relate it back to stats. Okay, but remember, if you've got a problem, come see me afterwards. Joe, you're right. I thought you had a question. You're right. Okay, guys, you see the problem with stats is that unfortunately we start conspiracy theories. Yes, Simpiwe.
Can I ask you something? The Economist. I have a problem with economists, for instance, who give statistics or who give inflation rates and so on, because the reason why I'm trying to correlate this to who do they work for and whose interest do they represent.
I like that. Okay, I like that. 100%.
Because if you, for instance, an economist that works for ABSA and FNB and all the major banks and so on, do you honestly think that they will give views that are not in the interest of the banks? And if these people are paid by the banks or they draw their salary from the banks, is that not somehow conflict in the sense that if I'm going to come and give stats, that I'll give you an example. If an economist is going to he's going to say the CPI rate is 5.5 or it's going to be 5.5, And me as a consumer, I don't think it's 5.5, like you rightly said, because I might not be. If I look at the companies who give wage negotiations, and they base the salary based on that 5.5%. We look at the salaries and it does not equate to
5.5.
5.5.
Definitely, point taken. And to come back to your bank scenario, what is the potential outcome of a 5.5% CPI unit? Jill Marcus is going to bring the interest rate down next year, the beginning of next year. Well, this is what's on the cards. Now everyone's saying, oh, that's great. How are the banks going to benefit from that? Remember your SWOT, opportunity. What is the opportunity that a possible opportunity that the banks can tie into? People can then get bonds and maybe buy houses. Okay, now we can start conspiracy theory. So I hear what Simpiwe is saying. Where's that information coming from? Who is drawing it up? And whose best interest have they got at heart? Because at the end of the day, it's all about money, correct? But this is what education is about, guys. Just because an authority figure stands up, remember Tony Milgram? Just because an authority figure stands up and says, this is the way it is, you know now. Marianne, are statistics 100% accurate? No, it's impossible for them to be 100% accurate. So ask those questions. How did they get to that answer? How did they get to 5%? How did they get to 10%? Is that sample? Remember, everything around data is around a sample unit, especially if we're dealing with large amounts of number. Does that sample unit relate back to me? How representative is that sample unit of me? So as Simpiwe rightly said, they say CPI is 5.5%. So invariably, what do organizations do? They look at the CPI and they say, okay, 5.5, so we're going to give you a 7% salary increase. You get your 7%, and you realize that you're actually 10% down. So maybe your CPI is setting at 10%. I don't know. Because petrol has gone up. How many times has petrol gone up? About 4 times. Who's that? Okay. Right. I like this last sentence, guys. It says, an incorrect application of statistical method to a particular data type can render the findings invalid. Very, very important that, okay? Right, and then I just want to look at the bottom there. It says qualitative random variables. Can I ask Sashia, won't you read for us?
Qualitative random variables are variables which yield categorical, non-numerical responses. The data generated by qualitative random variables are classified into one of number of categories. The numbers representing the categories are arbitrary, for example codes. Coded values cannot be manipulated
arithmetically.
It does not make sense.
So in other words, we cannot fool the data because it's about numbers. Okay, that's what they're saying there. Guys, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but this will help you with your requirement 1. But remember, from a data point of view, you have to take cognizance of all of these things. So it's an integration of all of this information. Do you see how much information we have to be thinking about when we actually draw up our questionnaire? How much information we have to be thinking about when we talk about knowledge and true belief? Agreed? Okay, so look at the next one. It says 1.4, quantitative random variables. Look at those quantitative random variables. Age of employers, 16 to 65. Distance to work, 0 to 50 kilometers. Size of classes, 1, 2, 3, 4. An example, 29 years, 6.3 kilometers, or 12 pupils. Do you see that? So that is quantitative. So in other words, quantity. Okay. Look at the next one. Data type 1 includes nominal scale data, ordinal scale data, interval scale data, and ratio scale data. So in other words, what they're saying there is that, let's say I'm looking at my particular workplace and there's 20 people working in my workplace. Nominal would mean, nominal or ordinal would be a very specific question. Interval will be between this age and that age. So it'll be an interval notation. And then ratio, everybody know what a ratio is? Let me look around the class. Tell me what a ratio is, please, Mandy. Yeah, Mandy. Ratio, what is a ratio?
It's like a fraction. So it's
It is a fraction, but it's
proportion.
Excellent, proportion. So it's a proportion of something. So let's say I've got 20 people in my particular workplace group. I might say, what is the proportion of males to females? What is the proportion of 18-year-olds to 30-year-olds? What is the proportion to pregnant females to females that aren't pregnant? What is the proportion of married females to unmarried females? Married men to unmarried men. So that's where proportion comes in, that ratio. Okay, so if there's 20 and 10 of them are men and 10 of them are women, what is the ratio? 1 to 2. 1 to 2 or 2 to 1, depending on which way you read in the actual ratio. So for every 2 people, 1 is a man or 1 is a woman. Okay, have you got me there? Okay. Right, guys, so that's just your data, ordinal scale data. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. You guys can go through that. Are you happy with that? Okay. Interval scale data. Once again, we spoke about it. Just look at the types of words you use there in your questionnaire. I just want to look at it quickly on 22. It says, indicate your response to the statement, shopping is a social experience for me. Tick a value from the Linkit rating scale. So strongly disagree, disagree, unsure, agree, or strongly agree. Who's made mistakes with questionnaires like this before? I have. Where they put 1 to 5 and they assume everybody knows what you're talking about, but you've actually swapped it around. So 5 is maybe strongly disagree and 1 is strongly agree, and you've taken it as being the other way around. Has that happened to you before? Okay, so once again, don't make the assumption that everybody knows what you're talking about. If you're going to have a questionnaire like this, you must make sure that the respondents know exactly how to respond to that particular questionnaire. Otherwise, it's no longer viable. Okay. Ratio scale data, well, there we go, age 47 years, and then you've got all your information. And if you turn over the page, random variables, and I want to move on to data type 2 on page 25. And it says a second classification of data types is made up of discrete data. Now once again, what is my definition, Emmanuel, of discrete? What is your definition of discrete? Remember, from a cultural point of view, is this important? I spoke to a young black lady yesterday in one of my classes. And the reason why I'm bringing up young black lady is we were doing facilitation skills. And what is an important thing in facilitation skills? Have you done with facilitation skills yet? What am I doing?
Eye contact.
Eye contact. Culturally, is that acceptable?
No.
In certain cultures, no. So she actually brought up the point, and she said, young black lady, and she said, you know, she got onto the taxi the other day, and she got into the taxi and she made eye contact with an older gentleman, and he shouted at her. He shouted at her. Now, we might laugh about that, but that's a cultural implication. So when it comes back to data, discrete data, if we are asking a certain cultural group questions and we're expecting a response, and maybe even if I'm a white male, and that person has got a very strong cultural upbringing, and I'm asking her questions and she won't make eye contact with me, I might take that in a different light, correct? So it's very important that I understand that. So discrete, that discrete data, if I'm talking about sexual relationships, if I'm talking about diseases, that kind of thing, is that discrete? Yes, it has to be discrete. How are you going to acquire that particular data? Am I, as a man, going to sit down in a closed room, just listen to the scenario, closed room with one girl at a time asking her about her, I don't know, sexual experiences? How real is that data going to be? It's not going to be very real.
Very scary.
Okay? Very, very scary. How could you make that situation, from a discrete data point of view, how could you make that more real? How do you make it open in a group? I don't know if that, I disagree, but you can shoot.
It's going to be private and confidential. Ask them to fill it out on their own. Take them the information.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Girl with the girl.
Girl with a woman, maybe, or okay, woman. Okay, what? Okay, you said it in a group.
No. I'm just trying to. If you give the assurance that the information that that they bring out will be treated as confidential, or anonymous.
No, I hear you. All of these things you can do, and this is the whole process that you have to go through. There are no wrong or right answers here, and that's why I'm saying I disagree with you. I'm not saying you're wrong. You hear my words? I disagree with you. But what you're saying might be true and correct. It might work in that particular group, especially if you're working with once again, listen to the word, black cultural group. because maybe they feel stronger in a group and they'll share better. But if you're dealing with a white young girl, would you share better in a group? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it might work better one-on-one. So do you see, once again, it's very important from a discrete point of view that we understand the cultural group that we're actually talking to. Would you agree with that? Yes. Okay. So that discrete data collection is very, very important. You come from
Nigeria.
Nigeria. Yeah. Just think about your culture. Are there certain things that are taboo and other things that you would do? So from a data collection point of view, if I went in, it could actually be a huge flop, correct? My questionnaires could be great. Everything could be great. But I could make one faux pas with regards to culture and the whole process could fall flat. So this discrete data collection is very important. Make sense? Okay. Continuous data. We hear about this all the time, where maybe a child is born and then after 3 years they're collecting some particular data from their child all the way up to 20. Have you seen this data collection process? So that's an example of continuous data collection. Okay. So maybe, do you know what red tide is? Red tide? Nobody come from KwaZulu-Natal. Red tide. Red tide. Nobody know red tide? Okay, it's where, I actually don't understand it, but I think it's mussels. You know the mussels in the sea? When they come in and they're highly poisonous. Aren't you from Natal?
No.
You see that assumption? I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose, okay? I did it on purpose. Be careful of making assumptions like that, okay? You, that particular cultural group, aren't you from there? Aren't you from there? Okay. Okay, so just be careful of that. But red tide, that would be another example of continuous data collection. Because why? Red tide, generally it happens once every season. And fishermen know that you have to be careful. You cannot eat the mussels because they're poisonous. And it's called red tide. Haven't you heard of this? Okay. Okay. But that would be another example of continuous data collection. Okay. Discrete data, well, we chatted about it. I'm not going to go into any elaboration there. Are you guys okay with that? And remember, it's not only from a personal nature, but it's also from a fear, from an intimidation point of view. So look at the one question there. It says, they asked a question here somewhere about, do you feel intimidated by your boss? Remember I spoke to you about it this morning. So from a discrete point of view, if you want honest answers there, you have to know where you're going to ask those questions. Okay. Are you going to ask it at that job, at the location? Are you okay, Mandy?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Monday, yeah. Monday, I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, sorry. Continuous data, everyone okay? You're right. You don't need to run out. Okay. Right. Data sources. Now this is an important one as well. Can I ask, Joe, won't you read for us, please?
Data for statistical analysis is available from many different sources. There are two classification types of data sources: internal and or external sources, and primary and or secondary sources.
Guys, I'm going to spend some time on this because this is important, okay? Shh, shh. Right, internal versus external, Joe?
Yes.
Internal?
Okay. Internal and external data sources are as follows. Internal data sources. This refers to the availability of data from within an organization. Internal data are generated during the course of normal business activities. Examples: financial data, sales vouchers, credit notes, accounts receivable, accounts payable, asset register. Production data, production cost records, stock sheets. Human resource data, timesheets, wages and salary schedules, employee personal employment files. Marketing data, sales data, and advertising expenditure.
Okay, so just think about something. Remember, think about your PMA2. What was your PMA2 about? Do you want to go back and just read it again? I'll get it up for you. I'll just get it up for you, yeah? It said, compile a questionnaire of at least 10 questions for research purposes in your workplace. Discuss the characteristics of your questions as well as the research purpose, process, findings and conclusions. So look at this here, guys. It says financial data, production data, human resources data. So now you can already start thinking, how am I going to structure that particular question? What information do I want to ask? Is it going to be around finance? Is it going to be around production? You with me, guys? Okay, so what questions am I going to be asking? So hopefully by the end of today, you're going to have some kind of format in your head of the questions you would like to ask your particular department in your workplace. Does that make sense, guys? Mandy? You're right, okay. Right, external data. Simply, why don't you read for me, please?
Data available from outside an organization refer to external data sources. Such sources may be private institutions, trade, employer or employee associations, profit-driven organizations, or government bodies. The cost of external data depends on the source. Generally, the cost is greater for private bodies than it is for government or public sources. Examples: private sources include commercial and industrial associations, associations of chambers of business, West Grow, Small Enterprise Development Agency, RESIDA, Industrial Development Corporation, IDC.
Okay, so all of these things, Westgrow and that, all of these are organizations that hold certain data. So you can tie, like Stats South Africa, so you can tie into them and say, what did these organizations say about this particular population group or this particular financial sector or this particular problem in the economy? And you can maybe use that data as well. Because once again, we already said, to get data, to get to those variables, is it time consuming? Yes, and time consuming means it costs money. So if you can get that information from another particular body that's already done it for you, then you can make use of it. But always bear in the back of your mind, it doesn't mean that it's true and correct. Okay, that's the scary one. Right, and it carries on there, and then it says public domain sources include newspapers. Now guys, what's the big problem with newspapers? Lies. You know, it's interesting. Emmanuel says that. I've got a. I'm not bragging, but we've got a friend, a South African, and he's emigrated to London, and he's a very, very wealthy guy. He's a billionaire in pounds. I'm not bragging about that. The reason why I'm bringing it up is this guy. He's made so much money, but you know, he never ever reads a paper in the day. He never ever. He says he won't read a paper. He says because everything is lies. That's his opinion, but it's just very, very interesting. Okay, he says that newspapers are manipulative. So, how do we sell newspapers? How do newspapers sell their particular article, product? Sensationalism, through emotions. If it's emotional, how viable is that particular statistical information? Okay, I'm just asking the question. I'm not asking you to answer it. Just ask yourself that all the time. Journals, trade magazines, and once again, a journal. Who is that? Who wrote the journal? Simpiwe's question. Who wrote it? Why did they write it? Who were they writing it for? Okay, I'm not saying we must turn into these conspiracy theorists and not believe anything, but we just have to be able to test this information that actually comes to us. Okay, universities, reference libraries, banks, HSRC, and the CSIR. Now, guys, just universities, to come back to that, I used to teach at a private school, and the reason why I'm telling you that is that we used to get so frustrated with a particular set of stats that was drawn up, I think it was every year or every second year, and it appeared in the Star newspaper, and it was the top 100 schools in Johannesburg or in South Africa. Did you ever see that? No. Top 100 schools. We always used to ask ourselves, how relevant was that? Because many of the private schools wouldn't even partake in that survey. So how can you say they're the top 100 when school A, B, C, D didn't even partake in that particular race? You with me? So ask yourself that, and what happened? They were paying to put their particular school in the newspaper. So the St. John's, the St. Stithians, because invariably those big powerful schools invariably end up being the top schools, correct? And they're very good schools. But how relevant is that top 100? Because if I say top 100, what do I mean by that? Okay, what do I mean by that? And that's a question you have to ask yourselves. Why wasn't this school in the survey? Why wasn't that school in the survey? Okay. Right, primary versus secondary. Remember we dealt with primary information and secondary information in professional writing. Can you remember what that was about?
Yep.
Come on.
Primary is straight from the source. Secondary is an interpretation of what the source said.
Right, so which is more viable? Joe? Primary or secondary? Primary is always more viable, correct? So primary is true and correct. Secondary is often not very viable. Correct? Not very valid. Incorrect. Think about apartheid, think about Adolf Hitler, think about all people in history that have done bad things and good things. Primary sources, first-hand accounts. I can say I'm a first-hand account, but I can be lying. So a lot of people say, oh, Emmanuel, he was there. So it must be true. Doesn't mean it's true, he could be lying. So be careful of saying a primary source has validity. I'm not saying they haven't got validity. But that primary source might be lying. And often what happens, it takes a secondary source to come out and to test that primary source. And they say, hang on a second, so-and-so, Joe said this. But now that we've actually a secondary source and a couple of secondary sources have gone out and tested that particular scenario, and they've actually found Joe to be lying. He actually lied about the situation. Does that happen? With domestos. There's 100% example of that. Okay. Guys, you're starting to understand where we're coming from here. Okay, so primary and secondary sources, you make sure that you use both of them, but don't just assume that because it's a primary source, it's a better source material than a secondary source. Okay. Data which is captured at the point, well, I'm not going to read that. You guys already know that. Eh? And look at this. I like this. Ratiocination. Advantages of primary data. Look at the advantages. Primary data is directly relevant to the problem at hand. Primary data generally offers greater control over data accuracy. But what's next? Look at that. The disadvantages. So with that said, with every primary, you get an advantage and disadvantage. That's what ratiocination is about. That logical flow looking at both sides. Secondary data, look at that again. Advantages, and then if you turn the page, there's disadvantages as well. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Data collection methods. So as soon as I say data collection methods, what should be going on in the back of your mind? How am I doing it? Another question. What are you trying to achieve through it? Another question. I'm thinking about the big time. How long will it take? If that data collection method, I've gone out, I've sent out questionnaires, my questionnaires are great, everyone's filled it in, and now it's taking me 5 months to get the data collection in, that data in. Once it's in, how viable is it? Because maybe it's already outdated. So that data collection method, a time frame is also very, very important. There has to be a stringent time frame there. So direct observation, interview methods, and experimentation. Observation methods, this is an important one. Observation methods include direct observation and desk research. We will consider the advantages and disadvantages of both methods. Look at that, direct observation and desk research. So remember my whole idea about standing in the toilet or whatever. You can't have a camera because obviously that's impacting on my rights as a person, but you maybe have a person standing at the door watching how many people are washing their hands. So that's a direct observation, correct? If you want a desk research, how would you do it? You could maybe have, I don't know, a monitor on the taps and a counter on the doors. So you know 15 people have gone in, but the tap has only gone on 5 times. So I'm making an assumption 15 people went in, but only 5 people washed their hands. You with me? So that's maybe a desk. That's the difference between direct observation and desk research. Make sense? Okay. We will consider the advantages and disadvantages of both methods. Very, very important. Just to come back to that direct and indirect or desk observation. My wife and I, we used to teach we used to help out in a children's home. And what happened is this particular children's home, it was a home for abused children. And these children, obviously drugs was a big problem with them. So we would have these doctors that would come in and test the kids on a random basis as to whether they were taking drugs or not. Now, think about direct observation and desk observation. So you want to keep, remember you have to go in and you have to check urine samples, etc., etc. So is that very, it's very personal, correct? So how do you keep that discreet? Often we would wait outside the bathrooms, correct? And you know what we found out? Remember, direct observation is coming back to direct observation, discrete observation, and desk observation. What happened is there was one boy in the home, and he was a little boy, and the other boys used to bully him. And the bigger boys were obviously stronger than him, and he was intimidated by them. This young boy, I won't mention his name, but anyway, this young boy, what we found out, because we were standing outside the bathroom, is that he would be urinating into 5 cups. And when it came out, whose urine were they testing? They were testing the young boy's urine. But Pierre was holding this particular boy's urine. Emmanuel, I was holding his urine. So we realized that in that particular case, to gather that information, what were we doing? We were trying to remain discreet, because a lot of these kids had been sexually abused, okay? So we were trying to remain discreet. But after that, we realized that we actually had to follow them into the cubicle and make sure that the urine that we were testing was in fact their urine. Interesting, eh? So be careful when we're gathering data. We get that, once again, discrete observation, direct observation, and desk observation. Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, but the statistics might be skewed. Okay, makes sense? Okay. Right, guys, and then desk research or abstraction, you can read through that. Interview methods. Once again, interview methods. Who's been interviewed for a research project or how did you feel? Good, bad? What is the survey about? Correct, because if it's something that's a discrete particular topic, then often we don't like to talk about it, correct? And once again, it's about a cultural thing. So,
I have an example about that. 2 weeks ago, there was a kind of a research done at work for ladies who were on maternity leave for the past 12 months. So I was one of those ladies. And like you said, there's this thing you did earlier on about strongly agree, and this one, it was like this. So you get questions like, how strongly are you connected to the organization? Do you enjoy your job? Do you see any growth? I mean, you literally had to lie because now we've been busy with the financial year and we're looking at increases and stuff like that. So it couldn't have been accurate because we'd said as those ladies and said, do you think this is right? Let's just make it. Okay, we strongly agree. Where else you don't strongly agree?
So if you're doing something just for the case of doing it, how viable is it? Okay, it's a very, very important point that. And often the powers that be are taking that information and saying, oh, this is what our organization is saying about us. But is that what your organization is saying about you? Okay. Yeah, interesting scenario that. Okay, but interviewing methods, remember that's that intimidation thing. So if I am a man and I'm interviewing a female, how is that female going to feel about that? If that's a process and they're going to be male and females, maybe there should be a male interviewer and a female interviewer. And maybe there should be different age groups as well. Remember professional writing? What was your PMA about? The 9 workforce trends. Remember? 4 generations working together. If I'm interviewing someone, maybe I'm regarded as an old oak. Okay, now I'm this old croc and I'm sitting there and I'm interviewing, I don't know, someone young, and I'm thinking, what does this person know about me? So maybe different age groups are even important. Don't you find that you open up better to a certain gender group or a certain age group as opposed to another group? Definitely. Okay, so you have to take cognizance of this when you draw up your questionnaire, and you have to decide who's going to actually ask those questions if it's going to be a verbal interaction. Okay, right. Desk research, chatted about interview methods, chatted about personal interviews. Well, we've chatted about that as well. Okay, so that personal touch, it can be intimidating as well. What do we have to think about from a personal point of view? Culture. Okay, Indian, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, all of these things, you have to take cognizance of all of these things. I recently I ran a workshop for franchise directions, and I'm just thinking there was a highly, I forget the term, religious Jewish person. And you know that he went and he prayed after at every single break. And then when he got his lunch, I don't know if you know this, anybody got any Jewish friends here? Yes, kosher, but their food is sealed. If that seal is broken, he won't eat from the plate. So when his food arrived at the table, it was sealed, and it's got if the seal is broken, do not eat it kind of thing. And you think, geez, like, is the guy going to get poisoned or whatever? But it's that kind of thing. So it comes back to your personal interviews. If you do not understand their culture, and the reason why I know this, guys, is because I've fallen into this particular trap. As I said, I came from a teaching background. Went to Cape Town in my 3rd year of varsity, and I went to a Jewish school called Herzliya Primary. And, young and ignorant, going to the staff room the one day, and the teacher, who's my mentor, says to me, so what's on your lunch? Jewish school, eh? Highly, no, I said ham. I almost got lynched and necklaced right in the staff room. And I didn't know, I was young and stupid. Okay, and we make these mistakes, and that's how relevant something can be from a personal interview point of view. You can go into a kosher environment, sit down with an interview, and you're speaking to a Jewish person, you're eating a ham sandwich. Okay, straight away. Your interview goes right out the window. Okay, it's something as simple as that. So if you're dealing with personal interviews, you have to understand the location and the organization that you're dealing with. Okay.
So we should start with the culture first, or?
Situational. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but when I say situational, depending on the situation that you find yourself in while you're doing the research data. Is it for one organization? Is it for a variety of organizations? Like, let's say, for example, at Da Vinci, they say, right, we're going to do a survey on a Sunday. Who are you going to offend? People that go to church. Because you've just assumed I don't go to church, so therefore nobody goes to church. Okay? You're going to, let's say, okay, we don't want to offend people who go to church on a Sunday, so we're going to perform the survey on a Saturday. Good thing, bad thing? Bad thing. What happens if you've got Jehovah's Witnesses? Their Sabbath is on a Saturday. You see what I'm saying, guys? And jazz sessions, okay, and jazz sessions as well. So all of these things. So when you're drawing up a questionnaire, culture, when you talk about culture, I'm not only talking about a black culture, I'm talking about a family culture as well. I'm talking about an organizational culture as well. All of these things have to be looked at. Okay, point taken, guys. I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but just look at that last one on page 32. What does it say there, Brandon? Who's ever partaken in a postal survey before?
Email and postal survey.
Good point. Yeah, I would say most probably that would be regarded as a postal survey. Email you have done, but postal I've never, because I think that's gone out the way. If you think about it, are you going to fill in a piece of paper where the person says, listen, please pay for the stamp, or maybe the postage is being paid for, and send it to this address? You're not going to waste the time. Because we're in a technology. Remember pestle? Technology. How has technology affected our data collection process? So definitely postal surveys, I don't think they would be very viable in today's world.
Okay. I would say in today's world, but there's also some parts like England, there's some villages that still believe in their postal service.
True.
So they do have a strong, England, I'll say they still have a strong postal service and at present.
Thanks very much for that, Brandon. So that comes back to what Pierre was saying earlier on, okay? That global data, can it be brought back to the South African situation? Sometimes, but sometimes not. So how could we affect that? We could say, no, the postal service doesn't actually really work in South Africa, and therefore we can't apply that ruling to an English situation, because they've got a very good postal service there. Okay, point taken. Right, guys, and then if we look at telephonic interviews, remember a big thing about, who's had one of these before? Telephonic interviews. Have you got some time?
Oh, no.
Okay, and you just want to get the person off the phone. But sometimes that poor person sitting behind the phone, they have to collect that data. How are they going to do it? Is semantics very important?
Yes.
Definitely. Wording is very important. Is tone important?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I love it when they start off and they say, congratulations, Mr. Goddard, you've got a free phone. So I say, thank you very much, you can send it to this address. No. But. And they say, no, but you just have to give 135 Rand a month. I said, but then it's not free. I said, my definition of free is I get it. No, you are getting it for nothing. And then I just let them play along a little bit. But telephonic interviews, very, very important. Okay, the wording that you use. Let's just go through it. It allows quicker contact, because it's immediate, correct? I'm collecting that data immediately with geographically dispersed respondents. So I don't have to get in the car and travel to Limpopo, because now I have to book into a hotel, the money involved, all of that involved. I can just phone and I can get that data, not immediately, but quickly. Okay, callbacks can be made if the respondent is not initially available. The cost is relatively low compared with personal surveys. People are more willing to talk on the telephone from the security of their own home. Isn't that true from a personal point of view? Yes. People are far more readily available to share on a telephone, especially about personal information, rather than face-to-face. Okay. Clarity on questions can be provided by the interviewer. The use of aided recall questions is possible. A larger sample of respondents can be reached. I like that last one. So a larger sample can be reached. Make sense, guys? I just want to look at experimentation. And I'm going to ask you guys just to go get some fresh air and break into groups. And I want you to read page 36 and 37, experimentation. and theme summary. And then in your groups, I want you to chat about activity 1. For each of the following random variables, indicate the data type, discrete or continuous, and classify the following data sources as either primary or secondary, and then do activity 1.3. Define primary and secondary data. Okay, and then look at activity 1.3. You see, I didn't want you to answer these questions wrong or right. I just want you to think about these definitions, show you how important the terminologies around these questions are. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, activity 1.3, define primary and secondary data. I'm not going to expect that of you, but if I go around the class, just look at me and nod. Do you understand primary and secondary data now? Emmanuel? What is primary data? What is primary data? First-hand account. First-hand account. Secondary data? A second person or a second group of people, organization, community, workforce came in and basically spoke about that primary source and then made a secondary source out of it. Okay, so that's the difference between primary and secondary. First-hand account, second-hand account.
Can you make can you turn a secondary source of data into primary?
Interesting point. Listen to it. Can you turn a secondary source into a primary source of data?
Yes.
Yes. When you do research methodology, and often that's what happens with people that are doing masters or PhDs. They're doing a thesis, correct? They are secondary sources. They're looking at a particular problem, maybe other primary sources and other secondary sources, and the information that they draw up becomes a primary source because no one else has done research around that particular area in the organization. So their secondary sources and primary sources that they've used, they actually draw up a primary source document, and that becomes a thesis. Okay, a working document. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, good. So section 1, we basically finished there, but we've chatted about a lot of things. So we need to think, if I can ask you to think about one thing at lunch, and that is the semantics around this terminology. We need to understand what is meant by all of these words. Okay, so when we're drawing up our questionnaire for the second part of our PMA, make sure that you understand and that you show me that you understand what is meant by continuous, what is meant by discrete, what is meant by primary, what is meant by secondary. Okay, all of those things are very, very important. Everyone okay with that? Bianca?
One question on activity 1.1.
Yes. Yes.
Number T at the bottom.
Yes.
The names of teams in a cricket league. Discrete refers to a variable, a numeric value, and the same for continuous. It's measured between samples. How does the names of teams fit?
Answer? Would it be discrete or would it be continuous? I would say discrete, because at a cricket league, in a cricket league it would be discrete, it would be known. So it wouldn't change. It wouldn't change, it would be specific. As a result of it being specific, it would be discrete. Okay. If it was a cricket league that was changing, but we know that those names have to be drawn up prior to that league, correct? Therefore it's very specific, and as a result of it being specific, it's discrete.
It doesn't necessarily have to be numeric specified.
Yes, when they say numeric, they're talking about it being specific from a number point of view. So 10, 11. So what they're saying is you can't have 11.2 cricket teams. That's what they're saying. Okay, so it can be numeric, but it is numeric, but it has to be specific as well. So it's impossible to have 11.2 cricket teams, correct? You either got 11 or you got 12. You haven't got 11.2. It's like saying I'm a little bit pregnant. Either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. Okay. Point taken. Right. Everyone okay with that? We're going to...